Hi, my name is Layla Koch.
And I'm her dad, Mike.
I am a classically trained musician.
I am a musician with no formal training whatsoever.
That plays rock.
That plays rock music.
And today we are going to be talking about Madame Maupin, who is more popularly known as Julie d'Aubigny, the French opera singing sword fighter bisexual. She was raised in France in 17th century in King Louis the XIV 14th's court by a noble who basically trained all of the troops.
So that noble was her father, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm. It was her father.
Okay. Did he have any other kids? Do we know? History has not recorded that?
So his name was...
So we don't know.
She was the only child to King Louis XIV's Master of House, whose name is Count d'Armagnac.
I don't think you're pronouncing that right.
Armagnac.
If it's in France, it's probably something like Armagnac, but close enough.
Armagnac.
So he was the master of the house, and he was Count. That is like totally a character in itself. Just the name, master of the house.
So she lived pretty much her entire life in the Palace of Versailles, and grew up in the stables, the great stables. She lived in the stable where the horses were.
So even though she lived in the Palace of Versailles, she was basically slumming it with the horses.
Mm-hmm.
Although the stable at Versailles was probably still a much, much better living accommodation than what they had for the poor.
Yes.
At the time.
Yes.
This is like Bastille Day kind of stuff.
So she became a professional rider at the age of 4. At 5, she started training fencing along with young boys by her father, and she excelled pretty much right away.
In fencing
And sword fighting. So
did they make like little swords for kids?
Nope.
Because
they would start with fencing swords because they were lighter, and then eventually, as they grew up, move on to swords.
Right, but even still, I'm just picturing a 5-year-old. A 5-year-old is tiny, okay?
I know.
So a 5-year-old trying to wield something that was designed and made for an adult, that can't be easy.
Oh, God, I don't even want to know.
I mean, just watching a toddler trying to handle a spoon. They're going to struggle with that. And here she is, like, trying to learn how to sword fight with a grown-up sword.
Well, I think she only lived to, I believe, 37, which was common.
Which was a ripe old age at the time.
Pretty much. So, at 5, plus, I think at 5, Mozart composed his first piece, so...
Right, but I'm talking about the physical size of a person. Regardless of how much you may excel at academia, your body is still tiny.
But you have to have a lot of strength for riding a horse, and she had been riding a horse from 2 to 4, and then eventually at 5 she started learning sword fighting. So she already had some strength from riding and basically bossing around a horse.
Yeah, but still... We're talking about a toddler.
It's true.
I'm sure she was a strong toddler, but...
Toddler nonetheless.
A toddler nonetheless, right. Okay,
so while training, she would love dressing up as a boy. And this led throughout her life. One of her most famous, I guess, confrontations, she once fenced, I believe, 15 men back to back, winning all of them. And had overheard somebody saying, a woman could never fence. She's too fragile and too blah, blah, blah. To which, after winning all 15 battles, she ripped open, she was wearing a man's shirt, but she ripped open the shirt to show her breasts and said, do you really believe a woman could not do what a man could do?
So pause for a second. When she was fencing the 15 men, did they know she was a woman?
No, she dressed completely up as a man.
So she disguised herself as a man first, won, and then shirt comes off and, aha, touche.
Pretty much.
Literally and metaphorically.
So, because of back in the day, if you wanted to fence at all, to even get into the club sometimes where they were fencing, you had to be a man.
To do pretty much anything, I would imagine you had to be a man, other than
Yes.
bear children.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately.
So, while this was happening, I believe at 14, she ran away to Marseille with her French instructor, Sorin. It's supposed to be nasal, and I'm no.
How? Let me see.
Right there.
Saron.
Sorin. So she ran away with her fencing instructor, Saron, who was at the time 25. They were 10 years apart.
Was Saron a man?
Saron was a man.
Well, for fencing, yeah, I imagine there would be scant few female fencing
After
instructors.
scraping a living together between fencing demonstration and in taverns, they basically, I believe, only lasted like 8-9 months. So she ran away with him, and
they split up.
However, the only thing that was known is she fenced her entire life until the end of her life, I believe. And she got not too old to do it, but something that we'll talk about later.
Okay, because I was gonna ask how she did die, but I guess we'll get to that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So she was known to kill or at least wound over 10 men in dueling.
Sword fighting.
Sword fighting.
Sword fighting and fencing, not dueling with pistols or flintlocks or blunderbuss, whatever kind of
fencing swords were
not
meant to be sharp. So actual sword fighting.
Okay, yeah.
All
right.
And so she had to be pardoned by the King of France twice.
He was probably afraid of her.
The first time is because of her most famous story.
Which is?
We'll get to that after this. But the second time, at his ball, she managed to basically not sword fight or fence, but duel 3 men at the same time.
Okay, so what do you mean not sword fight or fence, but duel? What defined duel?
I believe it was daggers and her with a sword. So she had the sword. Everyone else had like daggers and were trying to, mind you, she was actually in a dress. No, she was not. She was dressed in drag at this time.
So wait. So what's the setup for this duel? Was it like just was it for like having a quarrel and you duel that way, or was it for a spectacle? Or
funny enough,
how did it come about?
So these 3 men were trying to dance with one woman, and
at the same time,
just trying to get her attention, basically. And they were all friends, and like, oh, I'm gonna get her first, like a bet.
So guys in the 17th century were really not all that different from guys in a bar today. Okay, got it.
She came over dressed in drag. She walked up to this woman, asked her to dance, and then eventually kissed her hand. And the guys felt offended because none of them got the girl. So they challenged...
Yeah, because she was probably being a whole lot more considerate and polite, and she was probably more of a gentleman than they were, and,
So
guess what? It works.
So they went over and were like, hey, that's our girl. We called dibs first. Duel. I called duel. And then, of course, but at this time...
So it was a challenge.
Yeah, and the King of France had, basically said, no, we are not doing any more duels. It is illegal. It is illegal.
Someone's going to get hurt.
Mm-hmm. But they did do this at the King of France's ball. They went behind the Palace of Versailles or into the gardens, and they had a big old duel. She won, injuring 2 men. The last, I believe, was not injured at all, just ran the hell away.
He was the smart one.
A smart one. And told the king, this man dueled us, and it's illegal. He did it first, trying to get out of punishment, I'm guessing. And eventually, the king found out it was a woman. He went, a woman? A woman could not do this. So pardoned her because he did not believe a woman could defeat 3 men at once.
But didn't he know her? Wasn't it the daughter of his...
He knew her.
So did he find out that who the woman was? Eventually?
But she was going by a different name at this time because she is officially married.
Well, and I imagine she would not use her real name if she was dressed up as a man. Anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So did the king pardon... Did the king pardon what he thought was a man who had illegally dueled, or did he pardon what he knew was the daughter of his master of the house?
He said, and I quote, but he said...
In French.
A woman could possibly not take on 3 men at once. It is impossible, basically.
Right. Ce n'est pas possible.
So he believed that a woman could not do it at all. It was an impossibility, and
so he basically called the guy a liar.
He basically said, not a liar. He said, "You have the wrong person. This is a woman. She couldn't do this." So at 14, when she was having the affair with Saran, her father's employer,
who was the king,
not her father's employer.
Was it not?
Saran, not her father's employer, her father's employee, who was Saran.
Wait. Okay, you left out that detail earlier. So, when she was 14, she ran away with this 25-year-old, and her dad was his boss?
Not anymore. Not at that time. He had retired, but they met when we were together. When he still worked for the master of the house. Okay. So the father arranged for her to protect her reputation. Arranged for Julie to wear Seigneur de Maupin. Her husband literally right after the day, I think an hour after the wedding, went to southern France in Toulouse, and never saw her again.
Okay, you lost me there. What happened?
So, because...
Okay.
She was acting out. At 14, she was acting out. She was fencing. She was dueling. She was dressing in drag. Her father, and to try to save his reputation...
Okay, so he was afraid of the scandal, knowing that this was his daughter doing all that. Okay. So
he married...
He wasn't so much concerned for her as he was for himself.
Mm-hmm. So he arranged for her to marry Seigneur de Maupin. Eventually, he was immediately, about an hour after, went to southern France, to Toulouse, and he never saw her again. The only time they ever communicated after the wedding was with a letter when she tried to make the marriage work, finding that she could not do it. It lasted maybe like a month of letter writing to try to make the marriage work, and then they just stopped contact, and they never saw each other again.
A month of letter writing is hardly a marriage, but I digress. So, I feel like you're jumping around a little bit here. So, is this the same guy she ran away with when she was 14?
No, so at 14 she was married, at 15 she ran away with this guy.
Okay, so at 14 she was in an arranged marriage for the sake of her father's, air quotes, reputation, which she and apparently the husband did not want to have anything to do with. Husband was probably afraid he was going to get stabbed.
So the husband did it because he was only he was not employed at all by the court. He was offered a job in exchange for marrying the daughter.
And this was the best her dad could do. Really? At least find somebody with a freaking job. Come on.
So she ran off with Saran and I believe another fencing teacher. They believe another fencing teacher. And...
How many fencing teachers were there in France at the time?
I have no idea.
Seems like everybody was either a student or teacher of fencing.
So...
Didn't they have anything better to do?
when seeing her perform, men heckled that women couldn't duel as well as she did. She opened her blouse, and they were like, oh, God.
Her blouse?
Her blouse.
That's a blouse and a bra, isn't it? A blouse.
Well, back then they only had corsets. They did not have...
I'm kidding.
Eventually, she got bored with fencing and running around.
Topless.
Pretty much. And she became an opera singer.
Okay, wait, pause for a second. So we talked a little about this before doing the podcast, and you had mentioned that on occasion she would if she was going to fence or have a sword fight or was otherwise challenged by a man, she would use her femininity to her advantage and like tear her blouse open, exposing her breasts, and like distract the guy basically, and then proceed to
if it was
maim him. I could only imagine.
So she did do that. So the first time she did it, she was dressed as a woman. She was dressed as Madame Maupin. And she was walking out of a bar, I believe. She was walking out of a tavern, I should say.
Which was the 17th century France equivalent of a bar.
A man followed her. He said they think his intentions were to rape her. So
probably.
She opened her shirt. He was distracted. She beat the heck out of him. And buttoned her shirt back and went home. She would do it to distraction for safety if she needed to.
Well, I'm thinking
because she did not have a sword at the time. I believe she hit him over the head with a stray brick.
She could probably beat the crap out of anyone with her bare hands if she had to. But I'm thinking of a couple of things. One, this being, I guess the Victorian era, where pretty much people just didn't see that sort of, the internet didn't exist at the time. And we can't really even begin to imagine how shocking something like that would be to most people, to the point of, I wonder how many guys she would do that to, and they would, literally faint or have a seizure.
I agree.
Seriously, one. And two, interestingly, I've read similar stories on female pirates. What was her name? Bonnie Reed and Reed Scott. I can't think of the names off the top of my head, but when I was reading a whole bunch of stuff about pirates, they would do the same thing. They would go into battle bare-chested, and the whatever ship they were raiding would be full of sailors who doubtless would be dumbfounded at the spectacle and would be frozen in spot, and they would die there.
Yeah. So
very effective.
So moving on, I believe the ages are varied because they don't even know when she was born. Approximately, she was born in 1673.
They didn't keep very good records at the time.
They used...
few survived, I'm sure.
They used baptism records to see closest. But
it's not like babies were born in hospitals. It would be at your house, and then, oh, hey, there's a new baby in town.
So, she fell in love with a woman. They believe when she was about 16, 17. She fell in love with a 14-year-old woman. They did not hide this relationship at all. They were openly walking around, holding hands, kissing.
Well, if anybody had anything to say about it, it would be their last words. So, yeah, they wouldn't have to hide it.
Her parents placed the 14-year-old girl in a covenant.
The parents of the 14-year-old girl?
Yes. They put her in a covenant. Julie, in anger, wanting not to lose, pretty much, followed the girl to the covenant, took holy vows in the nunnery, waited for a elderly nun to die, put the body of that elderly nun in the 14-year-old girl's room, and set the entire nunnery on fire.
How long did that take?
They don't know.
Like, how do you plan for something like that? Oh, I'm just going to go to a nunnery and then wait for someone to die. That's...
So
if that was her plan, she got real damn lucky.
So eventually, well, that wasn't the plan. They were just going to set it on fire and run and hope nobody noticed.
Somebody's going to notice a bunch of nuns on fire.
The nuns escaped. Nobody was killed in the fire.
Somebody's going to notice a nunnery on fire with nuns running out of it.
Yes, but they wouldn't notice 2 missing nuns. They're hoping. But they eventually fled after this.
Would they notice the missing nun that just happened to die at an opportune moment?
They believed it was the 14-year-old, so they went, oh no, she died. Eventually they found out, what happened. So,
How?
History records are not good.
I know, that's what I'm saying. Like, I could, at the time, there was no such thing as forensics, right? So,
no.
Whether you find the badly burned and charred body of a 14-year-old girl or a 99-year-old nun who died of old age, they wouldn't really know the difference.
Okay.
I could get that. But at the same time, I would imagine a little bit of time would have to pass in between the death of the elderly nun and the fire. Wouldn't somebody go, hey, what happened to Sister Bertha? Shouldn't she be having porridge by now?
So they set the building on fire, fled town.
How did they start the fire?
Good question.
Did matches exist at the time?
They could pour, how they had those coals you put in the little pan under the bed, in the hot pan?
Yeah.
Maybe just pour it on top of the bed. That would easily set the sheets on fire.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So they set the building on fire, and eventually they were caught. Julie took all the blame.
How did they know the girls were the ones setting it on fire? Again,
when all the nuns are there except for the 2 that they find had run away.
Fair enough. Carry on.
So Julie was sentenced to death for the crimes of arson, body kidnapping of a body, people endangerment.
The dead nun?
Yes, people endangerment. And she was tried as a man.
I'm sure, having a relationship with another woman was a crime of some sort at the time as well.
So she was tried as a man because nobody could figure that, or because the girl's family, the 14-year-old girl's family, wanted to save the shame from the parents.
So how do they explain a man in a nunnery?
I don't know, but the king found out it was a woman, fathered a woman could possibly never do this.
Okay, I'm seeing a recurring theme here.
Pardoned her. This was the first time he pardoned her. On top of that, the opera she was singing for, the head of the opera, who was, I believe she was sleeping with him at the time.
Okay, wait. There's a lot going on here. She's a nun, an opera singer, sleeping with the head of the opera, and being pardoned by the king all at once.
And sleeping with that 14-year-old girl still.
This is a busy woman.
So
how do you find time to do all that, especially in the 1600s? Like, you didn't have Uber.
So,
how are you going to get from all these places?
So, because of this, the head of the opera wrote the king a letter personally saying that her voice was the most beautiful in the world and it would be a shame to lose it.
And,
that helped the pardon.
That helped the pardon. But I'd just like to point out, I feel there's some degree of plausibility that she might, as an opera singer, she might have sucked. But the head of the opera was just too terrified of her to say such.
Now,
rightfully so, but, I'm just saying.
It was said that she was an amazing opera singer. She had a very good voice. She was very talented. And she had a photographic ear instead of memory. She could hear somebody play the melody. And if it was in French, she could sing it. If it needed to be recited to her, she would recite it perfectly. So she never learned how to read sheet music. But she could easily recite and memorize anything that was said to her or sang to her.
So kind of like as it was portrayed in Amadeus, when Mozart could hear a song played once and then play it back perfectly.
Yes.
He had memorized it as he was hearing it. She had the same ability.
She had the same ability, yes.
Quite remarkable.
So after 3 months of the relationship with this 14-year-old girl, she became bored and ran away, left the girl there, I believe with her parents, and just ran away.
Pause. How? How does one join a nunnery and burn it down to get your girlfriend out, and then months later you're like, meh, this is boring, I'm done? What? Really?
A week later, she was sword fighting with a duel. She was sword fighting and stabbed a man, Louis Joseph d'Albert de Lunius.
He was pretty delinious after he got stabbed, I'm sure.
He went by, we are going to call him Joseph.
Because he's got 22 names and that's just too damn long.
He reached out to her, or she reached out to him. Julie came back, nursed him back to health, and they became lifelong friends. He was her only friend, pretty much. She probably killed everybody else.
He just happened to be the one that was hardest to kill, and, he didn't die.
So after she eventually went back to opera, she took a little break.
Took a little break to stab her soon-to-be best friend. So they were friends. Were they involved romantically in any sense?
Nope.
Or was it was a purely platonic friendship?
It was 100% platonic friendship. They never became lovers.
Okay.
So, after that, she went to the Paris Opera. Her lover at the time, an opera singer named Gabriel, she left him after his alcoholism got too bad. So she went back to her father and went back to King Louis for her to be fully pardoned of everything. So, nobody could talk bad about it. Nobody could say...
Clean slate.
Like getting your record expunged. And because right-hand man, he said
Master
yes.
of the house?
Yes. He said yes. King said yes.
Said yes to what? Pardoning her?
Completely, fully pardoning her.
Okay.
From both things. Now, while she was at the Paris Opera, she played many famous lead roles. She took many lovers, men and female. And one scene involving a not very good actor to a duel after she challenged him to a duel after she rebuffed his advances. He called her a slur, a homophobic slur. Julie waited for him outside the theater, beat him senseless with his cane, stole his watch and snuff box. He talked about...
Oh, the snuff box too. Oh, damn.
The next day, he told everyone how he had been mugged by multiple men.
Multiple men?
Multiple men. And struggled with them. And it did nothing. Julie walked right next to him, held out his snuff box and watch, and he was laughed off the stage by everybody in the cast.
Slow clap.
She commonly took trinkets from every man she dueled because they would say, "Oh no, I got mugged." And she'd come over and be like, "Really though?"
She knew that would be the only way anyone would believe her. So she was smart too.
So the next thing that happened,
what year are we up to, by the way? Just curious. In her life.
I have no idea.
Somewhere between 16 and 20, I'm guessing.
So she got in a fight with a...
So wait, hold on. Something else to point out here. Not only was she beating the living crap out of these guys, following her out of bars and taverns and whatnot, and taking their snuff boxes. But she was doing so as a teenager.
At this time, she was in her 20s.
Okay. But still.
Yes. At 20 years old, my biggest accomplishment is taking care of 3 cats.
To be fair, one of them is larger than average. Just saying.
Okay, so after that, she got in another duel with a duke. I'm talking about her most notable duels because her duel number, both fencing and swords, goes into the thousands. Because she has been dueling since she was 5.
Again, how do you find time for all this?
So
incredible.
If I do some calculations, so
here we go.
If she had 28 years of dueling.
So the records and the stories of this that we have that have survived, what sort of sources are they? Like what?
The entire cast is one for the snuff box and watch guy. Because he was laughed off stage by the entire cast and crew.
Right, but what I'm saying is that have survived to this day. What written accounts are there?
Letters. Mainly letters. Like, because
okay.
Her friend, Joseph, reached out to her. She reached out to him in a letter.
Okay, so letters primarily from her and to her. Were there any other accounts? Like other people in the cast would have correspondence with their family or
pretty much
whomever, and they would talk about it.
However,
tonight's performance went well, and what was her name?
Maupin, Madame Maupin.
Tonight's performance went well. Madame Maupin performed beautifully, and then
beat a guy with a cane.
Beat Ferdinand with his own cane, and you know what? He's an asshole anyway, so good for her.
So.
Never did like that snuff box anyway.
I'm going to tell you a shocking fact at the end of this. But...
You're going to make me wait? That's cruel.
So, some of the fights that we're going to talk about, the duels that we're going to talk about, are her most famous ones.
Mm-hmm.
One, she stabbed a duke. He was sent back home to recover. He wrote her a letter apologizing for whatever he had done.
He should have thought about that beforehand, but
She snuck into his room, made love to him, forgave him. They became lovers for 3 months. Mind you, she's been married since 14. She's still married.
Wow.
Another fight. This is not a fight, I would go. As I would say a kind of a middle finger, I guess.
An insult?
No.
An affront to one's dignity?
She was rejected by a man that was the leading co-star of this opera.
He was probably scared of her.
So she stabbed herself with a dagger in front of him, trying to win his love. He nursed her back to health. They never got together.
I'm going to speculate here. Now, by no means am I any sort of, scholar of psychology, but she has issues, doesn't she?
She threatened to shoot a duchess.
Okay.
She attacked her landlord. Bit Joseph on an occasion. So hard. We don't know what led up to this. But she bit him so hard that blood was drawn. We don't know where he was bitten.
Is there any weapon available at the time that she did not use, including her own teeth?
She did it in the middle of a performance on stage.
Like I said, she has issues.
So Joseph was what is considered a grande. Grand?
Grand, yeah. What?
Grand.
Meaning large.
Grandee.
Yeah, okay. 2 E's?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so grand, Grande, means large.
Oh!
What?
So, a grand
He was fat?
is a Spanish nobleman or Portuguese nobleman of the highest rank.
So she had already stabbed a duke. She's just, check that one off. Now, next one is...
No, she stabbed him before the Duke.
Oh.
Okay, so...
But in any case, she was obviously going through a bucket list of some sort.
Eventually, she fell deeply in love with Madame le Marquis de Fronsac, who is dubbed the most beautiful woman in France. They had a relationship for years, what is assumed to be about 2 years. Her longest relationship, besides the arranged marriage, I guess.
I wouldn't really count that, but
no.
Okay.
Until the La Marquise died from fever. She was broken deeply and was not able to recover from this. She retired from the opera in 1705, entered a convent where she died at age 33. People don't know where she was buried. They don't know how she died. And
so
people really don't know what happened.
So the second covenant, did they not realize what happened to the first one? Because I would have pretended nobody was home. Like, she comes out. It's like, hello? Shh. She burned down the last one. Shut up.
So
get away from the window.
I don't know why they took her in, but she was taken in, and that's...
I'd have made her sign a contract saying, I will not burn this one down in exchange for room and board.
So... that's where she now,
okay, so here's another thing. If they know that she died in the covenant at age 33, why do they not know exactly how she died? Granted, at the time, yeah, it wasn't uncommon, but still, I would think that someone would be more likely to live to an older age than 33, secluded in a convent or someplace like that where you're not around a lot of different people and exposed to whatever plagues and diseases and viruses and other things I didn't understand at the time, and also just everyday life where you might have a quarrel and get stabbed by a crazy woman. You'd be more likely to live longer under those circumstances, and the fact that she did not, it's just kind of curious.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about how she met Joseph.
Which one was Joseph?
The friend.
Oh, the
friend.
Platonic friend
Well,
that she stabbed and nursed back to health.
She was walking around town. He tried hitting on her just as she finished singing. And he lets out, I've listened to your chirping, but now tell me of your plumage. Plumage. Basically, does the carpet match the drapes?
I get it.
So, she stabbed him.
Rightfully so.
Visited him. And became friends. So,
end of story?
Pretty much.
Okay.
So she eventually moved to Brussels for a while. She returned to Paris.
Where is Brussels exactly?
I have no idea.
Okay.
Is
it in France? Or is that a country?
Brussels is in Belgium.
Okay.
It is the capital of Belgium.
In Belgium, in the context of Europe, is like kind of Eastern Europe?
Pretty much.
Okay.
So...
Not very good at geography.
So, her dad's name...
Mm-hmm.
Which I find this hilarious.
He's got like 17 names, doesn't he? What?
His name is Gaston. No.
Yeah, of course. All right. Well, they are French people after all.
They are French people. I think that's hilarious, though. That
His name was Gaston.
his name is Gaston.
Probably not an uncommon name in France at the time.
Mm-hmm. So, big ol' bombshell. We don't know her name.
Whose name?
The woman we're talking about right now. Nobody has confirmed her name is Julie. People have called her, in letters written by her, she is addressed as Julie, Julia, Eunice.
Could they have all been nicknames? Kind of like you might call somebody, a couple of different versions of the same name, but they're just different nicknames. Like, I don't know, Patty, Pat, Trisha.
Yes,
for
but
example.
Some are wildly different. From Julia to Eunice
Okay, but
to Maria.
But keep in mind, we're talking about France.
Mm-hmm.
We're also talking about a very long time ago. It might not have been uncommon at the time. I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. Also, it's also, I would think, somewhat plausible considering how much trouble she caused. She might have gone by different names at different times.
Pretty much, yeah.
So that would be another possible explanation.
So, after another thing, when she stabbed herself on stage because somebody rejected her, one of her lover at the time, the Elector of Bavaria, found her too intense because she stabbed herself.
Who could blame him?
He bribed her to leave him alone. He bribed her 40,000 francs to leave her alone. To leave him alone.
40,000 francs at the time was probably the gross national product of France. That would be a lot of money in today's measure. Wow.
So that...
You probably could have purchased Belgium with less money than that.
So, she died in 1707 at 33. Her birthday, her birthplace, her real name, all unknown. She's known best as Madame de Maupin, Madeleine, Julie d'Agny, Emile, a whole bunch of things. Her real name is debated to this day, but people call her Julie d'Aubigny because it's the most popular. Her father's last name, of course, was not d'Aubigny. It was...
Her father, the master of the house to King Louis XIV.
Yeah, was, just something else.
Okay, so here's a question. You've mentioned her father, master of the house, so forth. What of her mother?
Unknown.
Really?
Nobody knows anything about her mother. However, she acted out what people believe, some historians believe she acted out. So, many people believe that she was a redhead. Back in the day, redheads were discriminated against for many reasons. So they believe she was discriminated against at a young age because of her hair. And she had acted out because she wanted to prove her worth, because all that.
So I wonder, natural red hair is not necessarily common, at least by today's thinking, right? So I wonder if her mother maybe was from like Scandinavian or Irish, somewhere where redheads would be more common.
Mm-hmm. So people believe that redheads are violent and that they're troublemakers and that they...
Well, she surely didn't go about disproving that.
No, so she tried disproving it. Eventually...
Well, she did it wrong.
No, eventually she got frustrated because nothing she was doing. She was still always getting in trouble for doing nothing, being the scapegoat. She eventually said, fine, I'll be the monster you want me to be.
At the age of 5.
The age of, I believe, 7.
Okay.
That's when she started flirting with Saran, who at the time was, I believe, like 19-ish, like too old for her.
Yeah, that's... Mm-hmm.
So...
Not exactly an enlightened age in that perspective.
So, to get into the opera, Julie had an affair on both ends, because she's still technically married, with Gabriel Vincent the Venard.
Well, show business hasn't changed all that much in the past 400 years.
Who persuaded the Paris Opera for her to audition. The opera was like, oh, she's really freaking talented. And one critic at the time said she had the most beautiful voice in the world, and from 1690 to 1694, she was one of the biggest and most sought-after singers in all of France. She was a very popular, very, very, successful singer.
So why'd she go around dueling people if she was making such a great living at singing? Just the way she was.
So she humiliated a countess to whom she was a maid, like acting as a maid, by putting radishes in her hair as decoration. Radishes, like,
I know what a radish is. Who put radishes in whose hair?
Julie put radishes in a countess's hair because the countess insulted her performance, so Julie dressed up as a maid, put radishes in her hair before the royal ball.
And the countess didn't realize she was putting vegetables in her hair.
She topped them up and, like, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know anything about anything else. It's just said that
I feel like something...
She was humiliated by her...
radishes.
Because of radishes.
I feel like something's getting lost in translation here. Like... like, what did radishes represent in the 17th century that we're not getting?
Well,
that was such an affront to one's dignity.
I'm guessing because you had to grow them, and, countess, she probably barely lifted a finger to brush her teeth.
Okay, well, you gotta grow everything, so why radishes? Why not carrots? Why not apples?
Probably in France, that was what was growing at the time. Radishes. Okay. Everything has its season. So that is the adventurous, confusing, and deadly story of La Maupin, who is widely known as Julie Daubeny. They tried making a movie about her. They want to make another movie about her. The movie is available on BBC, I believe. It's not good. It's highly Hollywoodized.
Of course.
Although I don't think you need to do that for this woman.
That's what I'm like, why is Marvel not all over this? Because
she is...
Or,
She has been featured nowadays as either Badass of the Week, Rejected Princess, She's seen nowadays as a hero, as a strong woman, as a feminist.
So she's finally getting the recognition that...
Barely, she's finally getting the recognition, yes.
Barely, but nonetheless, she's finally getting some degree of recognition,
yes.
which she surely deserves and has had to wait how many hundreds of years for.
So she died in 1707.
At 33.
At 37.
You said 33.
It's also might be 37. Nobody knows.
Well, okay.
I have read both.
Right.
Depending on where you go, look, the year she was born, the year she died, and her age, and her name is different. Some people refer to her as Juliette d'Aubigny. Some say Julie d'Aubigny. Some say La Maupin. Mademoiselle Maupin. Madame de Maupin.
A couple of things here. I wonder if, along the same lines as what you'd mentioned, the king who pardoned her twice, not believing that a woman could do the things that she did, I wonder if maybe, possibly, these various stories of her life, the reason why there's so many discrepancies, maybe it's not all one person. Maybe there were several women in that particular era around the same age who were all doing the same badass kind of stuff. And again, those who would make any sort of record of it just refused to believe that, it was so, in their minds, unlikely for one woman, let alone several, to be this badass that, it must have been just one person, but maybe it was not all that uncommon at the time.
So her first pardon is disputed.
Okay.
The reasoning.
What do you mean?
The reasoning. Some believe it's because the king didn't believe a woman could do it. Some believe that she was sentenced to death at the time and she was persecuted, but she tried out for the opera, and the head of the opera wrote a letter. This is known that the head of the opera wrote a letter saying that her voice would be a great loss. She cannot die because her voice needs to live on and needs to be shown. People believe she was sentenced to death, and the letter was written, and that's why she was pardoned.
Does this particular letter, has it survived? Like, does it still exist?
I haven't seen it. I haven't really looked for it too hard.
I'd be curious if it's.
If it is, it's probably 100% in ancient French.
Okay, but still, that could be translated.
Pardoning. Lama.
And as you're looking that up, there's another thought along the same lines is, this is one particular story of one, maybe more than one person who because of the prevailing attitudes of the time, which to a greater or lesser degree continue to this day, because she was a woman, would have, could have it's conceivable how easily someone like this could have been forgotten and written out of his history simply for being a woman. And
not just a woman, but a bisexual woman.
And that's kind of what I'm getting at, is to think about how many more people, because of the fact that there are quote unquote some sort of minority, be it because they're a woman, because they're not heterosexual, because they're a redhead, because they're got a different color skin than whatever the aristocracy happens to have, so on and so forth. How many other stories like this of very interesting people who have done some really incredible things with their lives have just disappeared, or been buried or changed in some way, shape, or form, and how little of that probably survived to this day, and what a damn shame that is.
So I cannot find the letter written at all, but I think the reason, so she came up recently, not because of the movie, but because...
Okay, so but pause for a second. What movie?
The movie that the BBC released on her.
When?
I believe in 2012.
Okay, so fairly recently.
Yes.
We're not talking about something from the 50s.
So what made her so popular recently is...
Black Widow ain't got shit on her.
So, people were, it's really not known who brought her up again, but a very famous, LGBT website, called, bisexual.org, published an entire article about her, and it went deeper and deeper and deeper until historians also started looking for her.
And that's what I'm really curious about, is the source material. Like, how do we know what we do know about her?
Yes.
What has survived? How?
Paintings. The most famous sketch, I should say, of her is her in full opera gear. The earliest painting of her is, I believe, at 14. It's the one... Her most famous, it's the one with the orange hair, where she's sitting, holding her sword. Another famous opera photo of her is her getting ready for an opera.
Can I see those for a second? Because I'm just curious about something.
Running lines. With someone, but she was painted with black hair to try to cover up
the fact that she was a redhead.
The fact that she was a redhead. There it is. I was like, how do I spell this last name? So, here's her most famous opera picture. This was supposedly drawn at the Paris Opera House.
Okay, so what's the backstory of the illustration? Because I'm wondering if this could be like something that was used for a poster to advertise the opera.
Unknown. People
believe it or not, even in the 16th century, they would, they didn't really have printing like we thought of it, but you would still, plus most people were illiterate, so you would still have something like that to advertise what was going on.
People don't know. The reason she became famous again, really, was because of the burning down the nunnery story.
Of course, because, violence. Hollywood, get on this. I like this. Okay.
So here's the picture of her at 14, the painting. On the same day, or in the same outfit.
Yeah, that's a fencing outfit, because I can tell by the little heart.
This is another one, same outfit. I believe this was right before she fled at the age of 15 or 16.
Do we know that this is an actual portrait she sat for, or is this somebody making a painting and calling it a portrait of her after the fact?
This was found in her father's study. So we believe... What was her father's study, I should say.
When was it found?
2000s-ish.
Has it been authenticated in some way, shape, or form?
I unfortunately do not know. Here's another photo painted at the same time, believed to be her and her last girlfriend, La Marquise, the woman who died of fever, who became her soulmate, as people say.
Right. The one after she died, then she went and joined the nunnery that she herself died in.
So this is a photo painted of her. They believe before, supposed to represent, like, that's supposed to be the guy she stabbed, that she became friends with.
Yeah. Okay. So this is, if she's if she would dress up in drag to do sword fights and fencing and duels, this is obviously not an authentic representation of that because you can clearly see that it's a woman.
Yeah. So this painting was authenticated, was painted by the Grand, her friend. Mm-hmm. This is what she was wearing when she saw him, but he had it painted so you could tell it was a woman.
So wait. So this is the platonic friend that she nursed back to health.
This is the friend that she stabbed after saying
he was a painter.
He was not a painter. He hired a painter because he was a nobleman, and this he had this painted after her death to remember her.
Okay.
This is the other famous painting when she's preparing for an opera. Here's the writer. She's painted with black hair
and topless.
It was very common at this time for women to be shown with their breast, if not completely out, then hanging out to show femininity.
Also because it was painted by guys and, they were just as horny back then as they are today.
So, yeah. So this is part of the TV show. Or the movie, I should say. It was made in 2004. Yeah, no, it's not. It was not in French. It was 100% British cast. Nobody.
Right. What's this?
This is a book. They wrote some. People have written books about her.
That looks like a Man Ray photograph.
I don't know who it is. This is a statue believed to be of her. This was sculpted and is on the Paris Opera House. This is believed to be her because they wanted to represent her because she was so freaking famous. They wanted to say, she's here. The woman you heard about, she's here. They believe some of her, like the costumes she wore. There's the parasols, there's the shoes. Okay. Like these are actual 16th or 17th century opera costumes that have survived? Yes. This is the most famous photo of her fencing. She was already famous at this time, so they painted her as a woman fencing. They do not show the man because I believe he got beaten and he was beaten in the duel.
And he was not about to pose for that.
He did not want his face shown. This is a cop.
That's the the DVD of the.
Yeah.
The British
She fights like a man. She loves like a woman. She sings like a goddess. But she was that
horny.
The life of La Maupin is definitely not a boring one.
Most certainly not. And again, there's probably so many more hundreds, if not thousands.
Oh, God, I don't want to know.
Waiting to be discovered.
So her duels and disagreements were very vocal, so a lot of them were written about. Sometimes there's believed to be a death record that she actually signed.
How do you sign your death record?
Not her death record. She signed. She was the last person to see the guy alive after she killed him in a duel, and he had no next of kin. So she signed his death record to claim the body and buried him. She did not know his name, so it just says, I believe it says, an unknown man and his date of death.
The 17th century French equivalent of John Doe.
So, she died a very rich woman.
In a nunnery. So who got her money?
Probably the nuns. I hope the nuns got it. Be like, sorry, I burned down your nunnery. Let me in. I'll pay it back.
Well, that would make sense. Like, why they would let her in. It's like, go away. I have money. Okay.
So thank you for having this talk.
Thank you for the very interesting story. And I'm guessing she never had any children herself.
She had more sex with women than men. She was known to date women more than men, although she did date men. She was
right, but never.
She never had any children. No.
At least none that we know of that history is recorded.
her life is pretty public, mainly because when she wasn't singing opera, she was burning down nunneries and
dueling people and stabbing them and nursing them back to health. So surely if she got pregnant, somebody would have
known.
Okay. Well,
the father maybe wouldn't be known, but somebody would know that she got pregnant.
Fair enough. Okay. Well, again, thank you for the very interesting story. Certainly
one for the mystery books.
One for the mystery books and one for the list of interesting biographies that
have been written. There's many biographies about her.
Good to know.
Well, I'll end this here.